Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I'm going to think aloud about this issue. Should we be obsessed with atheism? And what I mean by it is atheism a serious issue or problem? Or more specifically, is atheism the right sort of issue for us? And by we and us, obviously, I mean Muslims. Not because not because I'm exclusively talking to them, but because that's my background. That's what defined my background assumptions. So I'm going to talk about this issue in the context of those background assumptions. And I'm going to, as I said, it's thinking aloud. So I have some views about the issue. For example, I don't think about atheism at all. So I was wondering why other people are so, even though I'm a philosopher by training. So that's why I was wondering why other people are so worried about atheism or so excited about atheism. So I'm just going to think about this a lot. So basically what I'm going to try to think through is, firstly, just start with what is atheism, like what is the issue, just to specify or delimit it. And the second thing is why it is an issue in the West, especially. By West, I mean in the regions of the world which are dominated by modernity or capitalism, whatever. So Japan is part of the West, for example, as far as I'm concerned. And obviously then Muslims living in the West. And in the Arab world, because they somehow are fascinated with the West. The Arab world. And then the third point, which is my main point, I want to raise this question, why it is a misleading issue, in the sense that it is misleading to focus on atheism. So I'm going to, if I can remember, if I don't remember all, so I'm going to talk about these 3 points to start with. And I don't know how many sessions this is going to require, so because it's work in progress or thinking aloud, so I'll just follow my train of thought. I won't worry about how many sessions it's going to take, and it might take 1 session or 2 sessions, 3 sessions, and we obviously be returning to this issue in the future as well. So let's start with the first issue. What is atheism? What is atheism? Okay, let's start with the word. So the origins of the word atheism in the English language is from the Greek. Obviously not directly, but probably through French, even though I'm not sure about this. But that's not very important. But this, according to the dictionary I have, atheism mean disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. Lack of belief or disbelief in existence of God, one God, or gods. And that much is clear from the word atheism if you look at its Greek roots. Because in Greek language, so atheism in the Greek language, a mean without, without. So you put a in front of a word to make its opposite, and we use that in English as well with some words like this word, I guess, but also, for example, we use the word atypical to mean not typical. So that's the same. Basically for negation of what comes afterwards. And theism is from theos, which mean God in Greek language. So atheos mean without God, and so whoever is without God may be called atheist. But being without God is not the same as modern atheists or typical. It's not the typical of modern atheists, because modern atheists claim that there is no God, so he is not. So that's or God doesn't exist. So there is no such thing as God in reality, or something similar. So that's linguistically speaking. So in a sense, we can say that atheism, modern atheism anyway, or the one in fashion right now, is the rejection of the existence of God or gods. But in reality, what they are rejecting, their focus is not on African gods or Buddhist god. But basically, what they are rejecting is a Abrahamic conception of God, Islam and Judaism, and partially or also Christianity, to the extent that Christianity claim to believe in Abrahamic God, even though its conception of God as Trinity is obviously more akin to, or at least is a strange mixture of Roman and Abrahamic conception of gods. So, in theory, atheism is rejection of all God, but modern atheism, practically speaking, is focused on rejecting the conception of God, and by implication, the religions based on that conception, and Islam. But historically, both Judaism and Christianity has compromised their conception of Abrahamic God, and they have compromised with modernity in various ways. That's why, really, in reality, the whole modern atheism is focused against Islam. There's no doubt about that. And politically speaking, I don't know whether it is its intention, but it fulfills two important functions. Or has fulfilled two important functions: to justify, indirectly at least, imperial wars and cruelty and violence in the Muslim world. Through its portrayal of the negative implications of the conception of God, and the negative conception of religion based on it, and by maligning Islam, obviously you justify violence against Muslims in the name of, freeing them from their traditional intellectual shackles. And there's no coincidence that this movement took a huge leap in the Western world in the aftermath of the Iraq War. And there's no doubt that the atheism movement was used, or at least it functionally speaking, it was one of the one of the important tools through which Iraq War was justified, or at least the aftermath within the Western societies. The second role this modern atheism plays is its justification of implicit or explicit justification of racism and persecution of Muslims living in the Western world. For example, it provides a great backdrop to, the treatment of Muslim in France, for example. And the justification of move towards racism by even so-called mainstream center-right and center-left parties. And in these two functions, it provides, or it has bases in both the right and the left of the political spectrum. So Hitchens, for example, is an old Chomskyan lefty, and his atheism was very specifically aimed against Islam and Muslims, and he was a very popular figure among conservatives, religious people, so-called religious conservatives in the United States. And that shows, firstly, that it's not just the right which fuels racism against or hatred of Islam, and it also shows the common ground of both the right and the left movement in the West, because some Muslims seem to think that the left are the one who are specifically associated with the anti-religious and anti-Islamic movements, and especially atheistic movements. But as we see in the case of Hitchens, atheism, if it is targeted mainly against Islam, can have a wide support among conservatives and so-called religious Christians as well. And so atheism is rejection of the conception of God, especially Abrahamic conception of God. And it focuses on the existence of God. And that's where the Christian apologist and some Christian philosophers and some growing number of Muslim apologists and thinkers, especially in the West and some in the Arab world as well, challenge or try to challenge this atheism. That is their claim that God doesn't exist. And as well, I will try to say it in the final point, is that focusing on the existence of God is, and that's one of the, I think, um, one of the negative, or one of the shortcoming, no, not shortcoming, one of the negative aspect, or one of the downside of obsessing with the atheism debate is that our focus converge on the notion of the existence of God. But what Quran and Islam mainly focuses not on the existence of God. They take it for granted that God exists, but on the conception of God. And people are, from the perspective of Islam, people are on the wrong, not because they deny the existence of God, but because they have wrong conceptions of God. The problem is with their conception of God, not whether they think that God exists or not. And focusing on the atheism issue diverts attention from the conception of God to the existence of God. Because many people can actually agree with you that God exists, but that doesn't affect, Islamically speaking, their worldview at all, because their conception of God might be totally against what we consider to be the correct conception of God. So that's the issue, I think. So I'll stop here and we'll continue with this. Thank you.